First officer, all around good guy, and chief technical officer. So Dieter Staudinger, our good friend Eric, has decided to take a week off and go vacationing. I don't even recall him asking us. Do you, Dieter, if we wanted to go with him?
No, actually, to be honest with you, I have never heard him extend that consideration to us.
Yeah. Anyway, this is Fearless Flight Live. It's our weekly show that we do to talk to you all, anybody who has a fear of flying, or if you know somebody who has a fear of flying, or you're just plain interested in aviation. We love to talk flying and answer questions for you. And that is our goal, to support you in your efforts to overcome your fear of flying. We do encourage you to like us, leave a comment on our Facebook page there. And if you're not already a member, go on over to Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather and join us, join our group there. There's a lot of wonderful people there. The group's getting bigger every week. It's really cool, Dieter, to see how many people we've got joining every week when we go over there. So that was one of our long-term goals, was to get a place where people could support each other. And the more of you that go over there and support each other, the better it is. So if you've got any questions, you can either messenger me or send it to me at captainron@fearlessflight.com. You can put your share stories and experiences on the website and in Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather if you so desire as well. Tonight, we're going to talk about a couple of things to get a little, see if this is a new feature for us. We're going to talk about this day in history, and then I have another kind of a surprise crazy thing here. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the MAX issue very briefly. And this is kind of an indirect or an issue indirectly related to the MAX. And then I've got a question that comes in, and it pertains to one of the most, I think the most bothersome issues about fearful flyers, and a trigger issue, and that is the sensations that people experience. So with that, let's go after it. So if you would, Dieter, how about popping up that first slide, this day in history? Let's see, there we go, cool. And this is a date that we found some time ago, and we got a kick out of it. So this is the first airplane passenger, if you want to rotate to the next slide, Dieter. Mm-hmm. Little known, and maybe it'll stay that way, but it's always fun to play trivia with people. This was the first day in aviation history in which there was a passenger. Good old the Wright brothers. This was May 14th, 1908, actually, 111 years ago now. And the Wright brothers had flown on September 17th in 1903. And they were moving this thing called an airplane along, and they were trying to turn it into money in our great capitalist traditions here. And there was a fellow named Charles Furness, F-U-R-N-A-S, and he's 28 years old at the time, and he helped the Wright brothers. He was always interested in aviation. He joined the Navy, and I believe he was home on leave this particular day at outside of Fort Myers, Virginia, and this was the first two-passenger airplane here. I don't know about you, but that doesn't ring confidence into my heart so much. But anyway, they launched this, and Charles Furness was the first passenger to fly on an airplane. And we were joking that talk about a reason to be afraid to fly. If you were the first one to go up with these crazy people called the Wright brothers, that must have been quite a milestone for him. It didn't scare him, so we can put him in our make him a charter member of our Fearless Flyers for his efforts there and things. So this is that day in history, and then there's another one that we got a kick out of when we were looking through here. That's the next slide there, Dieter.
Yeah.
This is also National Dance Like a Chicken Day. And I remember this from high school. I think it was when somebody came up with the chicken dance. And so we thought we'd highlight that as well. And just for a little silliness here. And we played that into our theme from time to time because, you know, when you're afraid to fly, there's a lot of embarrassment that goes along with that. And I actually have a graphic, a model that was suggested to me by a fellow at one point in time with a little chicken. And I was worried that people would feel bad and feel more shame about that. But then we came up with this slogan that, you know, everybody's a little chicken about something at some point, sometime in their life. So no shame intended. So go out and do the little chicken dance today just to celebrate that you're working on your fear of flying.
And I think I just want to jump in here. What really, when I first connected with you and you had told me about the chicken, I thought, oh, okay, but it's like I thought I was a little chicken, but I'm an eagle in training. And for those of you that are not, you know, watching regularly, we are in the, you know, finishing stages of putting together Captain Ron's first book, and this will come out later this year. And one of the things that is in the book is the artwork of, you know, the little eagle that thought it was a little chicken, and you know, because it's a journey. You know, I think if you're watching like Jim or Ryan, hey Ryan Yates, oh my God, it's great to see you. Great. It's
our all-time favorite school teacher, Ryan.
Absolutely. And maybe even the two of you or anybody else who's on, maybe you can briefly mention how it was a process for you, and maybe still is, because, you know, we live in a society where all we want to do is just take a pill and, you know, somehow not feel what we feel or feel better. But it is a process, it's a step-by-step process. It's not a mystery how you can get over your fear of flying. And we really, the Fearless Flight method and, you know, Captain Ron's 31 years of, you know, helping thousands and thousands of fearful flyers, you know, really we were able to distill that down into a pretty powerful, you know, process for you. So if you want to find out more, just head over to FearlessFlight.com. There's lots of resources there. And oh, hey, Mary Jackson, or McKillop.
McKillop, hey, Mary, how you doing?
So lots, it's and all of you that are watching, if you have questions, please put them in the comments, because even if we don't get to them, I mean, we've got a bunch already for tonight, but if you have a question about anything that we're talking about or something that you've seen in the news, put them in chat, put them in the comments, whether that's on YouTube, whether that's on Twitter or on Facebook. Doesn't matter, we're gonna get to it. And thank you, Ryan. Ryan says the Fearless Flight method works, and but it only works if you're working it, right, Ron?
Yep, that's right. And so let's just say all the little chickens in the world unite behind me, because I'm one of the biggest little chickens in the world. Because you know, people think, hey, I'm a pilot. B, I've got a master's in counseling, and that is what qualifies me to help people. Actually, what qualifies me to help people is my own issues with fear and anxiety in my own life. Just didn't happen to relate to flying so much. And then the 31 years of working with people like Mary, like Ryan, like Jim, all of you folks out there who in direct contrast to being thought of as a little chicken, my heroes, really inspiration to me for the courage that you've shown in overcoming your fear. So I get just chills when I think about some of the things that I've witnessed with people going through the classes and flying out there. So, okay, on to the next slide. So, of course, it wasn't a week without any controversy over the MAX, and indirectly this week, however, it was not a typical thing about the Airbus. There was a little bit of a controversy out there. There was an article just, I think, right after the show last week that talks about some of the engineers at the mid-level in Boeing had highlighted some of the issues with the MAX, and of course there'll be a lot of controversy over that, and they'll be investigating that as part of the overall fix for this. I'm going to restate one of the things that I've said week after week is getting the airplane into the air is going to be the easiest task that Boeing is going to be faced with. The real challenge is going to be to get the confidence of the people of the U.S. and the world to jump back on that airplane. I'm confident because I've seen this in 50 years that I've been involved in aviation. There have been accidents over the years with a particular type of airplane, and then one or two other things related in succession, and people talk about how that airplane will never fly again, and it's never proved out. This just happens to be a sad, unfortunate current event with the 737 MAX that has caused that. And not directly related, as I highlighted in the opening here, this week there was an incident with a 737. I think it was just a regular 800, and it made an emergency landing in Tennessee following a potential mechanical issue. I think what they had is they had an unsafe indication in the nose gear. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, in the cockpit we have 3 lights, just about like that, and each one of them has a green light on it. And we get an indication when we put the landing gear down, the lights flicker to show that the landing gear is taking the command and moving towards the extended position. And conversely, if we raise the landing gear, they also give us signals. But basically, this was when they had some kind of a malfunction, and they ended up landing in Nashville, which was short of their destination. They were headed to Atlanta from somewhere up north of there, and of course they landed without event, and the airplane rolled out. And what would typically happen in that case, we would declare an emergency. That's between us and air traffic control. However, the way we approach situations like that in an airplane is that we consider it a non-normal landing, okay? And that's seriously how we take it. It's not an emergency. We declare an emergency because then that gives us traffic priority, and we don't get slung out and delayed if we had something something else that might go wrong. So when they landed, they probably had the fire trucks alongside the runway just for safety. They come to a stop, and typically if you have anything about the gear that was an issue, what they'll do is they'll have somebody come out, and they'll put gear pins in the landing gear to make sure that they won't do anything funny on the way back into the gate. But that's it, and it's end of story. And then they booked everybody on other flights and got them to Atlanta later that evening, I believe. So, but the reason I put that in here, other than talk a little bit about that particular unique problem, was that, of course, your radar is tuned to anything that has a 737 in the front of it. Even though this was not a MAX, obviously, because they're still not in the air. It was an 800. It's going to continue to put out, bad press there, and you got to love it because Airbus is probably loving it because it's a lot of good free Airbus advertising by comparison, or by omission, I guess you could say. And then if what I wanted to do is throw out to anybody who might be watching here, what do you think? What's the story you tell yourself when you read stories in the news like this? And if you can think back on this, if you were aware of this, if you followed this in the news at all, and it said Boeing 737 makes an emergency landing in Tennessee, what's the story that you tell yourself? Because the way that our brain operates is we basically have beliefs that we have formed over the years. whether it's aviation, whether it's about immigration, some of the complex social issues facing us. We basically reach conclusions, and then we look for verification. So I've said this for years, that the most damaging thing about media events is, one, incomplete information, incorrect information, number two, and the fact that you don't have the expertise to filter it. And so I always highlight or recommend that you send me a copy of the URL if you can, if you want more information about that, and we'll help your system one get beefed up with your system two, that is your logical side of your brain, and would be more than happy to do that. But if you have a story about this, go ahead and jot it down there. If you get it in there before we end the show here, we'll go ahead and try to answer it there. Here's the last part of the show that I want to talk about tonight. If you want to put that next slide up there, Dieter. I had a coaching call with an individual. He happens to live all the way down under in Australia. I've got several clients down there. And what he said was his fear is based on a hypersensitivity to G-force, especially during takeoff as the plane is ascending. This horrible feeling brings on fear and makes me want to flee from the situation. I have a missions trip. He's doing some work with orphanages in Kenya. Really, really admirable, noble gesture on his part. And so he's got a big trip coming up at the end of July, flying from Melbourne, Australia, over to Kenya. And so I thought we'd talk about that. So if you want to bring up the next slide there, Dieter. So this is a schematic of a human being, and you'll see these three axes there. Now imagine if you're sitting right now in your chair, just imagine that you're on the airplane, okay? And you're just sitting there looking forward as this little character is. So we've got a yellow axis that goes through us. That's the one about which, well, that's the chest to back. So that's when we accelerate, you're going to feel a force pushing you back in your chest into the seat, okay? So that's one way to measure G-forces, because G-forces are measurable in all three axes, the X, the Y, and the Z axis. So right there, the from chest to back, we'll call that the X axis. You can see the G sub X there, okay? And then the other axis, or the second axis, is the lateral one. That's the GY. So that's the one for banking. Okay, so that tells me my balance organs tell me whether I'm banking left or banking right. And then the last one is the from foot to head, or from head to foot, whichever way you want to look at it. That's the x-axis. So that is going down through me this way. So the two that are the most triggering, I believe. Well, let me go back to what I said a little earlier in the opening remarks. Is my experience in the 31 years that I've been doing this is that sensing is what triggers most people's anxiety. Okay, now the noises contribute to that, and your vision contributes to that, but it's the feelings that you physically feel, particularly G loading, that cause your brain to first kind of get crossways with itself. And the reason that is because one, you've got those crummy little windows in the back of the airplane, and you can't see much. So when we do things like turn, if you happen to be looking out the window, you might have some perspective on it. But if you're looking anywhere in the cabin like that, you don't get a good sense of what's going on in terms of your X, Y, and Z axes. All right. So if we go back on this and we take it from the top, imagine that you're sitting there the pilots are about to release brakes on takeoff roll on the runway, and you start moving down. So that's the first sensation. And that is, if you remember, that was that yellow one, that's G sub X. And that's from the chest to my back. So as the airplane accelerates, I feel pushed back in the seat. Two things about that. One is, it's an out of control feeling by its very definition. and that is you don't have any control over it, but all of a sudden you get pushed back in the seat. And from our point of view, the bigger the engines, the bigger the push, the more we like it. But from your perspective, the more out of control you might feel. So that's a trigger right off the bat. And then once we accelerate down the runway, and now we get to liftoff speed, and the first thing you'll notice with that is the airplane is going to rotate slightly into a nose up attitude, and then we're going to fly off the ground. When we do that, the next sensation that you feel in terms of G loading is G sub Z there. You feel the green one, okay? And it's from your head to your feet, you feel pushed down into the seat. So now you've got the acceleration pushing you back in the seat, and the acceleration away from the earth pushing you down into the seat. And those two forces are going to play with you much of the flight. Now, as we accelerate faster and faster and faster, and we get closer to our cruise speed, you're gonna not notice the acceleration, because when the speed stabilizes, there's going to be no acceleration. The next thing that you'll notice is when we pull the power back and start to decelerate in our descent. But as we're climbing out, and particularly about 1,000 feet off the runway, one of the things we do to reduce the amount of work that the jet engines are producing, about 1,000 feet into the air, about a minute to a minute and a half into the takeoff, when we're accelerating nicely, we can just reduce the throttle just a very little bit. We're talking maybe 3% or so, barely perceptible to us. If I weren't watching the throttles go back, I might not even notice it that much. But what about you? Holy cow, you're back there and you feel, instead of being pushed back in the seat, you feel yourself falling forward just a little bit. And what does your brain say? Oh my God, they're trying to kill us again. Okay. And we make a slight power reduction, and there's a slight decrease in the engine noise as well. So your ears pick up on that, and everything reinforces those anxious feelings that again, I'm out of control here. But my hope tonight is to just help you explain that, and I got one more thing that we're going to talk about in terms of the force that you feel in the seat. But in just describing a normal takeoff, I'm hoping that you'll be able to equate those the next time in your airplane, in from the brake release, thinking, okay, this is where I'm going to be pushed back. Nothing abnormal about that. And then when I lift off, that's the first time I'm going to be raising or accelerating, being pushed into the seat. And you'll notice also that the nose is going to climb, and that's another trigger, and that's one of the things that bothered this particular individual who submitted this question, is he feels like, and some people say this, they feel like we're going to raise the nose up and it's just going to keep going over. Again, it's a false sensation, it's an illusion, and it's one that you're really particularly susceptible to, because it affects your balance organs, and it's looking for some sort of support from your visual input there. So any questions or anything about that so far, Dieter?
I haven't seen anything like particularly to what you just explained, although I did just put in chat, whether or not it makes sense to people as you're explaining what's happening. There are a couple of questions in chat, but I
Okay.
think it might be better if we just actually, kept this part.
Okay, cool. So let's do the next slide. And so the next thing is a little more complicated. And so I got another graphic here. And this is the other force that you see that can be problematic for people, is when we turn the airplane. So here's an airplane. You can see it's in level flight. So there's no acceleration either up or down. I'm just sitting in the airplane as you are right now in your chair watching this. And so the lift, characterized by the green arrow, and the weight, characterized by the blue arrow, are the same. All right. Now, centrifugal force and the vector sum of all those body forces we're going to see in the next slide. All right. So in the next slide here, what you'll see is what happens when we make a turn in the airplane. And this is the greatest bank angle that you would ever see as a passenger in an airliner, okay? And that is a 30-degree bank. And the N there, that's the G loading. So what that means is N, when we're straight and level, just me sitting in my chair, you sitting in your chair there, N is a G loading. It's equal to our weight, all right? So if I weigh 180 pounds, my G loading is 1 G, and my body feels like it weighs 180 pounds. But now this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So if you look at the airplane in a bank, okay, so we're flying along, and we turn the airplane, in this case, to the right. Now notice what happens, okay? The weight of the blue arrow is the same, right? The airplane always weighs the same. You can't make the airplane weigh any less. But now the green arrow, where the lift is going, is off to an angle. So if it's equal to like it was before when we were wings level and we turn, if we just keep it equal, we're going to actually be producing less lift than the weight of the airplane. So that's our dilemma in a turn. Anytime I bank the airplane without adding pressure to the elevator and pitching the nose up a little bit, the airplane would descend. So in order to compensate for that, we do just as I said, we raise the nose just a little bit. And what you feel is the 1.2. Remember that number, 1.2. So now if you weighed 100 pounds in just straight and level flight, you now weigh 120 pounds when we're in a 30-degree bank turn, okay? So that means you're going to feel pressure from the top of your head through your butt into the seat. And that's another thing that why people, you know, combined with looking out the window and seeing the bank, and some people have a sensation that they're going to fall, that we're going to keep rolling, or they're going to fall out of the airplane or something like that. But the primary trigger on that is the pressure that people feel in their seat. So you can know now, anytime the airplane banks, you're going to feel pressure in your seat. It's never going to be more than 1.2 or so, because we're never going to exceed 30 degrees of bank. And the G-force in a level turn is solely a function of bank angle. And that means that if I rolled into a 45-degree bank, and again, we don't use 45 degrees under normal circumstances in an airliner, but if I did that, now I would end up feeling 1.4 Gs. So I would be 140 pounds of pressure in my seat if I weighed 100 pounds. Okay, so that's one of the things that I explained to the person on the coaching call the other day. And speaking of coaching calls, I want to I want to emphasize again, if you're out there and you have not taken advantage of the free 15-minute coaching call, and you have any concerns, we see people all the time on Facebook and messengering me and everything, and they say, what can I do? I got a flight coming up. Okay, if you haven't done a 15-minute coaching call, please take advantage of that. And we'll have a link in the notes after we get done with the show here. So
actually, I wanna jump in here because that seems
okay.
perfect. So we just welcomed Ryan, but also I wanna welcome Andrew Yates,
cool.
Ryan's son, and I had the great pleasure of meeting both of you at the Cleared for Takeoff 201 class last year in Phoenix.
Yeah, I think it was April.
Yeah, and or June or April. And Andrew is saying, I'm going to Spain in 3 weeks, which is, I would be excited.
Man, you're working that to death, Andrew. I mean, I remember Ryan, the first time he came to class was because of an upcoming Spain trip, and now I think he goes every year. That's really cool.
So he's not quite as excited. So Andrew, Andrew is asking, do you have any tips? Now, I don't really know specifically, Andrew, what it is that comes up for you when you're thinking about it.
Yeah. So if you can, Andrew, just give us a little bit more specifics about
what you're flying over water, for example.
Yeah.
Or the fact that you're going to be on 3 different flights in various airplanes.
And if you could put that up while the show is on, we'll deal with it. Otherwise, we'll answer it afterwards. Okay. So yeah, and anybody else out there, if you've got questions, please don't hesitate. Put them in down there. So. And
then I also want to do a quick shout out to Karen. Karen is already signed up for a Cleared for Takeoff 201 class in July, and I'm super excited to meet you, Karen. And I think if I remember the comments correctly, that will be the first time in 2 years that you are going to be going on an airplane. And more importantly, we're gonna be, I think we're gonna be able to facilitate a really meaningful and a really powerful experience for you and everybody else who is gonna be in that class. So yeah, do you
So
want
we'll turn your anxiety into enthusiasm, Karen. And not only is Karen coming to the class, she's coming from Tyler, Texas.
Oh man.
Yeah. So she's driving. So we'll keep our fingers crossed for you, and we'll keep you in our prayers that while you're on the highway that you won't have any problems, because you're 200 times more likely to have an issue with a car than you are an airplane. So anyway, but I just want to point out that's an awesome commitment on her part. And we've done a little coaching on the phone, and I know that she's decided that this is time for her to get past this. So kudos to you, Karen, for being one of the first to sign up for the class, and we're really looking forward to meeting you in person. She's a really interesting person.
And then I just want to also maybe Paula Johnson says, hey, I'm flying to Maui tomorrow. What's your best advice, and best being in capitals? So Captain Ron, what's your best advice for somebody who is flying to Maui tomorrow? And
first advice, get on the airplane, Paula. Second advice, stay on the airplane until you get to Maui. Okay. Although I know you're going through DFW, so you're probably going to have you switch airplanes when you get down there, but just know that you can do this. And you got the best going for you. You've been working on this. We've been coaching. You've been working with the harmonizer. Just hang in there and do your best. And the one thing I'll caution you on, sometimes when people do the work like you've been doing, when they get to the airport, they get close to the flight, they notice that their anxiety isn't as much. So whatever you do, don't get anxious about not feeling anxious tomorrow. Okay. And it sounds crazy, but people, because when you do this, you start to change the way you think a little bit. So one of the things that causes people to freak out sometimes is they don't feel as anxious as they thought they should. Okay. And there's no such thing. Regardless of where you're at, just breathe, keep breathing, and don't quit. Okay. You're going to do this. And my prediction is by the time you get to Dallas, Fort Worth, you're going to feel a little bit more confident, and so that the next leg is not going to be near as anxiety producing as it was in the past. And then when you get on your way to Hawaii, first of all, when you make it, you're going to say you're going to feel like you cheated death, because you're not going to end up in the Pacific Ocean, which I know is one of your big fears there. Paula wrote me last week, and we were joking a little bit. She said she had gotten worried about thinking about not only did she have to fly over there, but she comes back at night, because that's typically the way they operate the airplanes. They depart usually in the evening out of Hawaii, coming back to the West Coast. So then she got to thinking about night. And of course, the story centered around at night. How can the pilot see and all that? What do you do about that? So I made it kind of a smart alecky answer. And I said, well, we practice by putting masks on ourselves when we fly during the day. Obviously, that was a joke. I hope she had a good sense of humor, because we don't do any such thing. In fact, flying at night is very, very much the same as flying during the daytime. We make a little bit more reference to our instruments up in the cockpit. And other than that, it's no big deal. It's no different than if we're flying in the clouds and all that. The one thing I will reiterate to you, Paula, is make sure that you take care of yourself. Identify yourself as someone who would like to meet the pilots, meet those guys, train them, if you will. Tell them you want to hear from those guys while you're flying. You want to know what's going on, and tell them to keep the thing on the road, because you're a special flyer back there. So anyway, so we wish you the best, and can't wait to hear the stories and see some pictures, hopefully, about your trip there. So you're going to make it, and you're going to be glad you went. And you're not going to ruin your trip by being on the ground in Kona and worrying about the flight back either. And you know how to get a hold of me if you need to. So you should be good to go. And we just wish you the best. We wish you the best vacation, because you deserve it. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I believe that Paula also has the harmonizer, right? The Fearless Flight kit.
It does. Yep.
So
Play the
that
thing over and over and over again, and do not falter on that. If I'm telling you, if you got any anxiety and that thing's not stuck in your ears playing, put it in there. Turn the volume up. You need to just zone out. You need to just pretend like you're just being magically transported like some Star Wars character to Hawaii. You don't need to think about what's going on. You just need to crank that up and keep your mind from getting washed out by that little voice in there, which is just a doubting Thomas. So use that harmonizer. I'm telling you, use it, you know, and don't quit until you get so sick and tired of listening to my voice that you want to reach through and wring my neck. Then you know you're getting better. But you've just got to do something to keep that little voice from getting a foothold and grabbing your attention and grabbing onto it like a junkyard dog. Okay. All right.
All right. So lastly, I wanna just direct you one more time back to Andrew. Andrew was typing in chat that it's heights and turbulence.
Okay.
And he said that heights in particular has been a challenge for him for a while. So maybe you could just speak
Sure.
to that.
And first, Andrew, you remember that if you have a fear of heights, it's related to our natural fear of falling. So you don't have to do anything other than picture yourself in a precarious position, well above the ground, and know that if you were to fall from there, you might be hurt. Okay, but that's not what happens in an airplane. So the story that you're telling yourself, or that your mind is telling yourself, is that being in an airplane because you're high is the same as being on a ladder in the middle of a room or something. It's not. It's just not. Okay. So again, the harmonizer is a great way to keep from listening to that story. But if that story starts up, you need to. What we do, we know that you got to, if you get over your fear of flying, you got to recognize your fear. And one of the things we've added in there is you got to rethink. So let's say that you're minding your own business, and all of a sudden you think about heights, you think about falling, you think about dying, you think about getting hurt, whatever it is. Just pause for a minute, take a deep breath, and think heights. I'm thinking, okay, or that's a thought, because a thought is not the same as a real threat. Okay. So, and then let's just say you keep having that thought and you're starting to feel your tummy be upset or whatever. Just stop for a minute, take a deep breath and say, that's a feeling. You want to separate your thoughts and feelings from the moment, okay? Because they are not all of who you are. Yes, they're compelling. Yes, they're powerful. You'll have powerful thoughts. They'll seem strong thoughts, and they may trigger feelings in you, but they're just thoughts and feelings, and that's all they are. So again, we want you to stop, take a breath, and rethink. That's a thought. That's a feeling. Okay? And rethinking is just kind of like mirroring in a conversation. It's just, you're just restating what you're hearing or feeling up here. And hopefully that'll help you out. Turbulence, very similar. Okay? For when people get into turbulence, what's the thought? So the first thing, or what's the story you're telling yourself? So the first thing may be that maybe as simple as, this is making me feel bad. Okay. And so again, I invite you to stop, take a deep breath, and just repeat. That's a thought. It's not hurting me. We're totally okay. We may be bouncing around, unlike any other experience in my life in a car or anything like that, but it's just a thought. And sometimes it generates a feeling, but that's just a feeling. That is not all of who you are. So you just stop, take a breath, and rethink. That's a thought. That's a feeling. And restate those, and you're going to do fine. I predict, Andrew, you're going to connect really quickly to the experiences that you've had before. That's a whole nother story, whole nother part of overcoming your fear, as to how and what we remember. And you're gonna grab onto some favorable past memories where you've had this before, and I don't think it's going to be that big of a challenge for you. You're gonna re-identify with those, and you're gonna say, "Hey, I've got this. I've done this before." Okay, so We want to say thanks to everybody for showing up tonight. We want to remind you that we do have the Clifford Takeoff 201, 301 class coming up in July 20th here in Phoenix. Get here however you can. If you live in Texas, have Karen stop by and pick you up on the way over there and share the ride. So whatever you do, I think we have, and I know we have the registration and information page up, and I assume Dieter's got that. We'll have it in the show notes when we get done here. We'd love to see as many of you as possible that can make that class. It's going to be newer, bigger, and more exciting even than the 201 that we did in Burbank. We're really looking forward to putting it on, and it'll be the last one here until we get closer to the end of the year there. So come on over and help us enjoy the class. All right.
And if you have questions about the class, we are going to be doing a special live show that is particularly focused on the 201 class in July. So
yep.
We're going to do our best to
yeah, so it's going to be kind of like a mini webinar. We'll answer all kinds of questions, but we're going to focus on the 201 class, okay? Give you the information that you need to help you make a decision. So stay tuned for that. We'll do a little highlight and announcement there, and come back and join us, okay?
And Jennifer is asking, what is the harmonizer? What I'm going to do for you, Jennifer, is I'm going to put in the comments, actually, a free 5-minute sample that you can listen to. And if any of you watching already have the Fearless Flight Kit and are listening to the harmonizer, just like Paula, I hope you are before your flight tomorrow. And I think, Andrew, you might have the harmonizer as well. Often people are saying, oh, I'm going to wait just before the flight. It's actually much better if you can, days in advance, start saturating your subconscious with all the multitude of evocations that are in that audio program, that are in the video, and just kind of let it seep in. So,
and that brings up a good point too, is don't wait till the last minute. I mean, I love to talk to you anytime, but people don't know what to do. What can I do to prepare for my flight, okay, in advance? That's why, if you haven't used the 15-minute free coaching, and I'll speak specifically to Jennifer, sign up, Jennifer, make yourself an appointment, and no, we don't want any chickens out there. Come on, get going with this. We need you to participate. We need you to take an active role in that. And I know it's hard. It's hard to take that first step, but it's painless with a 15-minute coaching call. And we can talk about things like the harmonizer and some of the resources and some of the things that you can focus on. You can build a plan to get out of your chair and into the air. Okay. So thanks again. Thanks, Dieter. And hopefully, Eric will be back from having a fabulous time. He's underwater now, if I remember right. He usually goes diving somewhere. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Fearless Flight Live on Tuesday night.
Okay.
Have a great week.
Have a good night, everybody.